Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for session 2. I think we'll give it a start. We have 300 people who have joined so far, and I will give some time for the rest of you to join. Meanwhile, we can just cover housekeeping, intro, and they will be back in time for Danai, hopefully. So thank you for joining us. We are covering the session. This is an intermediate supervisor session 2, and we will be covering enabling learning, utilizing available knowledge, resources. Again, this is session 2 for supervisors, intermediate level, and we hope we'll cover on time. Then I will talk about in-class and online teaching, learning, and everything that you have for Super Goal 1, 3, and 5. I'm just going to quickly check if you can hear me. Please raise your hand. There's a hand icon on the right side. Excellent, super. So you can hear me, that's sorted. Can one of the moderators please drop how you can connect to the audio? Someone just drop that in for me while I just go over the moderators. We've got me, Sarish, Nikos, Nasir, Medani, who are in the background to help you out with questions and answers. So if you're facing any trouble during the webinar, there's any background question that you have, please feel free to drop that for us, and we will be able to answer that for you. So please, if you have any questions at all, let us know, and we'll be able to help you out there. I want to introduce you to Danai, who actually needs no introduction at this point because she's covering all the sessions. She did the last one for elementary, and this week we're covering intermediate. She's been very helpful and patient with us, so thank you, Danai. She's a teacher, educator, she's a content developer, she's an author moreover. She's successfully delivered several training workshops. She has co-authored the Saudi editions as well. Just a bit of background. Danai usually shares a handout during the session, and she refers to a handout actually. I have to share the handout for you. So I'm going to drop this handout in the chat box. You can download the handout from this link. And the link has 2 handouts, handout 1 and handout 2. These are both labeled as well, so you should not face any trouble. This is the handout that she will refer to in this session. If you need the handout for a previous session, we will be able to share that with you. In fact, I will just do that in case you missed the morning session. So there you go. There are both handouts for this morning session and the session that we just covered. What else should we do? I guess I'll move on to housekeeping then quickly. So once you're in WebEx, you will need to connect to the audio. You won't be able to do that directly. You'll have to connect to the audio, and I've seen that one of the moderators has actually written the instructions to connect. So you can either use the call-in function or you can use your computer PC to connect to the audio. But I see you can hear me, so we're probably sorted with the audio. Lots of hands up, so you can hear my voice. That's good. The other thing that we advise and recommend is that closing down any high networking apps such as Netflix, YouTube, any gaming platform, because this affects the bandwidth during the webinar. You will be receiving the certificate of participation. Very important question. Yes, you will receive it of the sessions that you attend. This certificate is going to come in after November 19th once we complete the first course semester book series entirely. So once we're done with elementary, intermediate, and secondary, you will receive the certificate of participation. So be patient, watch out for that email. It's going to come in your email. It's going to have an option to download, and you will be able to download the certificate. We will have the Q&A opportunity in the end. Usually we run out of time, so we advise that you can go back. It's all right. It's time for prayers, we understand, and there's also a break. You also have classes to go back to, so feel free to log off after 1 hour. But we will stay back for any Q&As that come through during the session and also afterwards. And you've already noticed the chat box on the right side and also the Q&A box. These are both enabled for all of you, so you can chat with the presenter. You can also write your questions. Use the chat box, please, to ask any questions for the presenter, and we will try to cover this. But then use the chat box if you have any comments or to engage with the presenter. So Danai, you're going to read from the chat box. So that's where you have to write. Q&A is any questions that you have that we cover in the Q&A. And last slide from me is about just a few FAQs that come in regularly for us. You are being automatically marked by the system. So when you log in, you don't need to mark your attendance anywhere or mark yourself present. You are already there, and the system knows this, so it picks it up. You must have seen only yourself when you log in, so it's just your name that appears when you log in on the right side. You cannot see your colleagues or other supervisors, teachers who've joined the session because of GDPR purposes and privacy. The same reason why you cannot see their chat as well. So if other colleagues are chatting, then you won't be able to see them, their chat. But Danai usually reads out all the comments that are coming in, so you're engaged and you know what's going on. So thank you to Danai for that. And I've covered that. After you register, every URI link is unique. So I think we've covered this before as well, that the first link is not going to work for the PM link, and likewise if there is a different link for every session. So if you have teachers who have registered for the sessions tomorrow, there will be two links. There will be a 10 a.m. link and the 1 p.m. link. So just use the relevant link to join the webinar, and hopefully you're not going to have an issue. I've also done sort of a one-to-one registration login webinar training this morning. I've shared the link with your administrators, and you can, in case you missed it, ask them for the link, and you can have a look in case you're still facing issues with the registrations. Avoid using your colleague's link, last thing, because that just creates a confusion in terms of the webinar. Your name is not going to appear as your name. It's going to be a problem on the certificate as well. So we just encourage that you avoid doing that. I guess I will stop talking now, but I'll pass over now to Danai. Thank you so much. Over to you, Danai.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back, those of you who came back. Welcome to the newcomers. Okay. We are talking about intermediate, using Super Goal 1, Super Goal 3, Super Goal 5. I know that an hour is hardly enough to deal with all your questions and all your queries. We'll do the best we can. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Ahmed. Okay. So, I'll carry on with some things. I know in the morning session, a lot of you said that basically people are mainly interested about the tests and very little else. And there was a long talk about translation, and why we should or shouldn't encourage it. I hope we have all agreed that it's not the best way to deal with things, and it also is very time consuming. Okay, now enabling learning. When we want to enable learning, inevitably we reflect on the learners. This, I think, is quite important to remind teachers, especially if they're going to be using the material for the first time, because in a sense, they feel that they have so much to deal with new material and new book and what to do and what not to do, that they often sort of overlook the learners while they're preparing. And also, they don't really try to get to know all the learners, which is very, very important. Usually what I do with teachers is I suggest they have a ready sort of list with all the names that they have on their computer and can use and reuse. And every time they notice something interesting about a learner in a lesson, they jot it down. not comments about everybody, just very quickly things that they've noticed in every lesson. It only takes about a minute, 2 minutes to do, because we find out about learners as we work with them, don't we? So how much do we know about them? Okay. I would remind them about different learning styles. Auditory learners, visual learners. I would remind them about multiple intelligences, that different people have different strengths and different talents, different personalities. Somebody who is quiet is not necessarily what you would call a weak student. It's a matter of personality. And this, I think, is a very important point, especially with people who tend to work in a more traditional way and unfortunately restrict most of the interaction to teacher-student interaction. That is the sort of mode that often discourages less confident students or even shy students from participating, or students who can't keep up with the pace, who are not competitive, and so on. Cognition, okay, having to do with beliefs, attitudes, how they can do things, how they think. Now, cognitive processing is very, very important. We'll have to allow time for it. We'll mention it a bit later as well. Skills and talents. What if there's anything they know how to do? Yes, sorry. The second handout that you were given is the same as the morning one. That's for people who were not here this morning. I'm sorry about that. Disregard it, okay? Working with others. Some people like working with others, are comfortable working with others. Others haven't quite developed the social skills to work with others. Taking into consideration the fact that we're talking about teenagers, all sorts of things might happen. But also what might happen is that if you do encourage collaborative work and you have people working in small groups online or in class, and you listen in, you don't interrupt, you just listen in and observe, you might find out that there are students who perform a lot better in small groups than they do in class, or vice versa. Okay, competition. It's not true that all students like competition, that all teenagers like competition. They might pretend to, but again, competition will not necessarily include everyone. Just something to bear in mind. Sharing with others, that is a matter of personality, but also it's something that can be encouraged or discouraged from the way teachers work in class. In other words, if it's traditional teacher-student interaction, it's likely to be very competitive, and it's likely to discourage students from helping each other and sharing knowledge, sharing skills from it. So it's discouraging from that point of view. Okay, attitude to mistakes. Again, very traditional attitudes to language, grammar, vocabulary, translation, and particularly grammar geared, and exclusive focus on tests are likely to encourage an increased focus on mistakes. Interestingly, what happens in that case is if people are test geared, if test oriented, if teachers are test oriented, and the tests basically might have a different sort of format. They might combine all kinds of exercise types, task types, including questions, question answers, multiple choice, blank fills, whatever. they tend to focus on what people are having problems with rather than what they can do. And I think it's very, very important to really encourage, even push teachers to start noticing how much their students can do. But again, that is likely to happen. That is likely to happen again if collaborative work, group work, pair work is allowed. In other words, if the students are allowed to speak, to actually use the language, if they're involved in activities in class. Because if that is not likely to happen, all the teacher knows from a very traditional point of view is which students answer faster, which students make fewer mistakes, which students make more mistakes, and that's that. You get very little other information and feedback on who your students are and what they can do. So, those are cases where mistakes are not tolerated. But in normal circumstances, if you have collaborative learning and so on, do you think mistakes are tolerated in the language classroom? Do you think they should be tolerated in a learning context? What do you think? Yes, thank you. Mistakes make learning more effective. Yes, absolutely. They also indicate the fact that you allow students. Yes, yes, absolutely. It's advisable to use activities that involve some risk-taking and mistakes. What am I referring to here in terms of risk-taking? They learn new things, yes? You ask them to talk about, this is something that's going to come up later, so this is why we mistake to learn. Yes, we make mistakes to learn, yes. Okay, but for example, you ask them what they did over the weekend, or where any places they went to that they did something interesting, and they want to answer, but you've just dealt with the past, and obviously they're a bit worried that they might make mistakes and so on. Is that important? Yes, thank you. It does depend on the goal, on the task. But for a general question like that, yes, without affecting the flow of the language, for a general question like that, what you did, if you saw anything interesting, what did you enjoy, where you went and all that, you would be focusing on fluency, wouldn't you? If you were practicing the past tense, then yes, your goal is one of accuracy, grammatical accuracy. So you would basically pay attention. Yes, mistakes are a sign of progress. So, but I do sympathize with what people said earlier as well, that teachers often just worry about tests. And it's difficult to get them to accept mistakes, but they need to. Also, thinking of online work. It's a good idea to advise the teachers to do a very short sort of training session with the parents. Explain to them that it's important for them not to answer the questions for the children. That it's important for them not to translate everything. And that it's also important that they don't, interrupt to correct mistakes, okay? And explain to them this approach, that we have to let the teenagers, let the students try and use what they're learning, and inevitably they will make mistakes, but we want them to also develop fluency, so if they need to communicate, they can communicate. And also that's the way to learn. if you only say things that you're absolutely certain about, then you're not likely to ever develop. Okay. These are again things that cropped up in the last session too. Some teachers are opposed to collaborative work in class. Why? Some of you said because they feel that they're time consuming. Any other ideas? Well, yeah. She was in an awkward situation. The teacher was in an awkward situation because she asked what they did over the weekend and nobody answered. So she had to skip and explain the lesson. Okay. They're practicing fluency. Okay, teacher can use what they already know when they're practicing. Lack of motivation, and okay, they can't control the big number of students. Students rely on those who are excellent. Yes, again, in a traditional classroom where you have teacher-student interaction only, person to person, individual, that is very often the case, unfortunately, because this is something that has come up really from teachers. That but what do I do? How can I keep everyone back? How can I delay people who are ahead? Yes, up the passage. Okay. They can't control the big number of students. Okay. Okay. 6 directions participation. Yes. Okay. All right. All kinds of reasons why they're opposed to it. But to go back to the example you gave of a student asking the students what they did over the weekend. Well, what I would do instead of asking the whole class is get them to work in pairs, find out what they did over the weekend, anything they did, at least 3 items, make a note of them, and then report that in class or to a different partner, or get them to work in groups and do it. Yes, fine, Minecraft, yes. Yes. Okay. There are all sorts of other very interesting things coming up, but I won't be able to deal with all of them. A number of teachers are reluctant to allow collaborative work online. The why here is sometimes practical. A number of teachers last week said that they didn't have access they didn't have access to the function that allowed them to group students together in pairs or teams. It doesn't matter which. Okay. How can we cater for different needs and abilities in a class? Okay, again, here, my answer would be by encouraging collaborative learning. Because if you don't, then yes, you will have, on the one hand, boredom in the case of more confident students, and on the other hand, the rest of the students who are not going to be as confident or not as, if you like, weak, not as strong, will get lost completely and probably give up. A quiz and competition. Yes, fine, quizzes, competitions. You're thinking about the weekend too. That's okay. They could guess at each other's activities. Okay, choose groups according to what interests them. Yes, that's possible. Okay. Not necessarily. I mean, what's interesting is fine, but also about organized preparing for the lesson at home to increase group working. Okay. First of all, look in your about how you can organize things. Use your teacher's guide, please, because there are suggestions there about what activities you can organize in pairs or groups. But pairs or groups are those things that are going to the types of interaction that will help you deal with different needs and abilities and help you involve and engage students throughout the lesson because they will be active, they will be doing things. Pair them according to their competencies. Yes, possibly, sometimes not. Yes, you can connect the lesson to their daily life. Okay. Now, whether you pair a strong student with a weak student or not, that's an ongoing discussion. Sometimes you can, or sometimes. But what I would say is, if you have a few strong students, just put them in different groups, not necessarily pairs. Put them in different groups of mixed abilities. And get them to operate as leaders. In other words, they're going to be like teaching assistants almost, which makes them feel good and helps you deal with the, yes, you must know the learning style. It helps you deal with the mixed abilities. Is there really a class that's not mixed ability? Is there a group of students that's not? Applied jigsaw strategy? Yes, of course. In other words, always when you've got something to deal with, make sure that you work in some kind of information gap so that they don't have to ask, for example, questions about something that they all know about already. I know I'm just putting it in a nutshell very quickly. I'm just responding to a comment. How would you introduce a topic in an intermediate class? You have already made a number of suggestions that would be suitable. But would you ever introduce the topic by saying to the students, now open your books and look at page so-and-so? Hello? No, great. Great. That's the one thing not to do. Yes, it can be show them a video, ask them to predict the topic of the lesson. If not to predict, provide an issue or the topic of the lesson itself with pictures, with images, get them to brainstorm, give them some questions. Again, you will see examples of how you can do that in your teacher's guide. But it's best if such stages are also adapted by the teacher who knows the students. Revising previous knowledge related, yes, of course, because one of the things you can ask them to do is to brainstorm on words and phrases that they expect to find or to use. Tell a story, display a situation, yes. But you can start telling a story and maybe get them to finish it off. Whatever you do, this first activity, when we begin the lesson, what you want to do is to draw the students out. You want to involve them, engage them. And usually we engage students by withholding things, yes, predicting, completing, guessing, exchanging information. Absolutely, we all agree. So that's what you say, okay? So that, yes, drawing if possible. So you want to elicit things from the students. In other words, you want to activate their own knowledge sources, which is also the basis of skill development, particularly receptive skills development, isn't it? Okay, so just a quick run through the different types of interaction. Teacher to students. Okay, some cases where you're using that, presenting new language, giving instructions, etc. When you comment on participants with yes, no, we don't, what was the comment of the president? So if you read the comment, yes, I'll try and do that too. Thank you. It's just they're coming very quickly, and yes, you're absolutely right. Let me just say one thing that whatever comments, questions, all this wonderful feedback that you're giving us this time will address a lot more directly in the second cycle in January. Yeah. How to deal with crowded classes? Well, if you only deal with crowded classes like this, then basically you're going to get very little student speaking time. So this is why we would like to have this kind of practice. If you're in class, you call out names if you're online. If something is new and they're practicing it, or you want everybody to hear, you use open pairs. Okay? If it's something that you want them to think about and prepare in groups, in pairs or in groups, closed pairs or groups, exchange, share information, interview, role play, lead-in activities like brainstorming and so on that we talked about, doing checking exercises, working together with teacher monitoring. Also do bear in mind that this is what they can do. They can, when they're correcting each other's work, yes, flipped classroom, yes, all kinds of versions of flipped classroom. So basically, yes, you hand over. But what the activity you're doing has to be very, very, very clear. So there are a whole range of activities. There's a whole range of activities that are doable like this. Okay, so closed pairs are very important. Students to students in groups, closed again. Online, again, chat rooms, breakout rooms, you can listen in. Okay, for discussions, project work, role play, creative activities. Okay, fine. So, what does a teacher get? Teacher monitors. This is where we get most of the information about how much learning goes on. In other words, we listen in. Okay? Listen in and observe and make a note of things they can do, things that we might have to do more work on. We try to prevent ourselves from jumping in and correcting every single mistake, but this is also our chance to maybe help when help is needed. So even though they can't see us, even though we're not there physically, when it's online, we can still listen and do what we need, what we would do in class. Educational apps can help teachers to apply different kinds of interactions. For example, Padlet. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. But you need to have the principles. You need to know why you're doing things. So this is what we're talking about here. So tell them why. Tell them why educational apps can help. Give them the rationale behind it. Okay? One of the very important points, of course, okay, this is openly flipped roles, but one of the very important points, of course, is, again, to optimize time available for learners, to optimize activity. Yes, I know a lot of your teachers are doing this, are explaining and are giving the principles behind things, okay, and using the apps. Okay, so here, student to student, this is totally flipped, okay? Good for later intermediate and beyond. But even early on, if you organize it correctly, where the students take over, okay, and basically operate as teachers. They present things. So if they have a project and they have gone off and found some information and have got some visuals to show or information and all that, then they can present it to the rest of the group, to the rest of the class. Okay, students to students. This can be done in pairs or groups even. So a group of students or a pair of students can collaborate, prepare the project together, and present it to the class. So that's a quick run through again here. Why do we want this? Because we want, again, to optimize available resources, but we also want to optimize knowledge resources and sources that the learners have. To apply role-play activities. Yes, fine. They use Mix microphones to apply role-play activity, for example. Yes, okay, fine, great. Okay, but if you want more learners to be doing role-plays at the same time in different chat rooms, in different places, then more learners will be practicing as you tune in and listen. Okay. Regarding students to students questions, who evaluates the answers and assesses them? You can't assess all the time, but you can listen and see what they're doing. Okay, give them a chance to practice, then ask them to demonstrate in class if you like. Okay. Also, Microsoft Teams. You only have one chat room in Microsoft Teams. Okay, fine. Then we do have an issue. Okay, in that case then, most of the things would have to be done in open pairs or open groups, I suppose, or you get them to do it very quietly. Is that possible in Microsoft Teams? I'm not sure. However, do look into, yes, teachers pick by names. Yes, of course, you nominate. But what I'm trying to say is that if you haven't got chat rooms, you can't get all the students practicing at the same time as you listen in. You go around the class, so to speak, and listen in and monitor, which gives everybody the chance to practice. Okay, what we want to really remember, what we want to remind teachers about is that students know quite often, again, this is focus on mistakes, focus on tests, somehow makes us or forget what the students know. They have no general knowledge, more specialized knowledge, topic related, experience, day-to-day experience and knowledge, school subjects, different areas of interest, personal, language and language skills, educational context, family, culture, skills. When we're talking about language and language skills, obviously we're talking about first language as well, aren't we? The concepts are there at least, okay? So there's so much they know, and quite honestly, there is nothing in Supergoal 135 that you couldn't elicit ideas and information and language that they can recall from the students to begin with. There's nothing that you need to lecture them on. Okay. So, again, I know you're going to say they're interested in the test. Yes, okay. Yes, they get teachers get stressed about the test because a lot of people tell them that if the students do well, then that's going to reflect very well on them, nicely on them. If they don't, it's not. Yes, to some extent, this is what assessment shows, but it's not black and white, is it? And if we really do want our learners to learn, then we need to focus on them. We can't forget them and prioritize, first of all, prioritize the book. More than that, prioritize the test as number one. Then prioritize the book, okay? Then put in the activities and leave learners last. It doesn't work. Yes, the problem is the mindset of teachers and how they're dealing with content, also opinions. I agree. But at least maybe get the priorities right. We begin with the learner. And what we have to remember is that they do know things and we want to keep them active. We don't want them to get bored. And teenagers are often blamed about getting bored very easily. And quite honestly, who wouldn't get bored if they just had to sit listening and not doing anything? So access knowledge sources through images, questions, statements, other tasks, okay? And the other tasks include gaming tasks, includes information gap tasks that require them to exchange information, make a note of it. That's another thing I would like to stress. Don't just ask them to ask questions. Ask them to make a note of their partner's answer if they're working in pairs, so they can then report on it. Always go that extra sort of little mile, that extra stage. Pairs, groups, pool knowledge. You activate the students' knowledge to begin with and hopefully improve with work as you carry on. Allow thinking time, processing time. When you set up activities, okay, and you say to students, okay, for example, you say to students, okay, museums, okay? Now, think about museums that you have visited, what you saw there, if you like them, and why. You didn't like them, why? Okay? It could be anything at all. Write those questions on your whiteboard, online, on the board, in class, or key them in and show them on the screen so they're ready, and say to the students, okay, think about this, and we'll discuss it. And then immediately after, without asking, yes, they can dig deeper in their thinking by asking simple questions. Like, what makes you say that? Why do you say that? Yes, fine. But what I'm trying to get to here is, you put those 3 points up for the students, and you want them to think. You can't expect them to start answering without allowing 1 minute at least, a couple of minutes, for them to start getting their minds round those points that you want to discuss, okay? That has to do with processing time. So we can't not allow some time for the students to think and formulate things, okay? Yes, thinking time, processing time. Okay, it's a make or break a lot of the times when it comes to activities. So that's another thing I would stress. And feedback, okay? So everybody's done the activity feedback. Feedback is, when I say feedback, I refer to the stage in class when students report what they've done, their answers, report on partners, and if you want to give feedback, teacher feedback on what they've done, that's a different thing altogether, okay? It's good to give teacher feedback as well that combines positive points along with maybe a couple of points for delayed correction. I'll try and explain what delayed correction is if we have a bit of time, yes? Okay, so it's always good to, yes, very good ideas, great. Okay, if you are going to present this as part of your work, why don't you look for some nice images, some photographs on the web. Okay, project in each unit is developed lesson by lesson. It's also better if the teacher asks this question at the end of each lesson. How this lesson will help you in your project to motivate students to think about their project. Yes, fine, I agree. I'm not suggesting that you deal with the project in the beginning of the lesson. I'm sorry, I was giving an example there. What I'm trying to suggest is that in the beginning of the lesson, you begin with the students. You don't tell them about the topic. You get them to think about the topic, activate what they know about it, or even what they would like to know about it, what they might expect. Okay, so you raise expectations. Okay, so you get them to predict anything at all to get them to use what they know, their general knowledge, not just language knowledge, in order to engage them and get them involved. No, these are, sorry, the PowerPoint presentation is not clear. Yes, okay, it's just to show you very quickly what the content is. I'm sorry about that. Yes, KWL, for instance. Yes, fine. That's what it's based on, okay? But the main principle is that the students know, so we address them as knowers. Just because they don't know some of this language, of the target language, or the forms of the target language, doesn't mean they don't know anything. Of course they know. They know a lot of things. Okay. And I have been lecturing. Too long. Okay, that's another instance. What you will find in the series is also subjects, issues that the students probably know about. Art of the pen, Arabic calligraphy, okay? Here you can design a whole lesson whereby you ask students to collect as much information as they can, discuss that in class, and then ask them to read and find out find out if there is anything new or which information is repeated in the text as part of their reading tasks, while reading tasks. Again, I'm going very quickly because we're trying to do this within an hour. I'm sorry. Things will be done in a little more detail in the teachers' sessions. But basically, you will find cultural subjects that are very specific to your learners. And if you want to then broaden those subjects and make them global, then you can go into all kinds of projects about different scripts in the world, other sort of penmanship issues, and so on, but put it in the textbooks, especially built to be delivered online, distance learning. There are e-books, okay, that you can use online. There is the interactive whiteboard material to be used online. There are lots of things already that can be used online. If you're thinking, what about the online learning center? Okay. What we're trying to do here, however, is trying to adapt things and to address things in a way that is going to be suitable for learners in your country or for learners anywhere. And obviously, they're not all going to be the same. We can't stereotype, not even within the age group, certainly not within the age group. In other words, we do say things about teenagers. Interactive whiteboard is very helpful, absolutely. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. But really, it's very difficult to produce something that is perfect for everybody. So to some extent, yes. Material can be produced, material that's going to be online, that's going to be interactive. There is already material that can be used online. So make sure, please, that your teachers have access to them. I think I mentioned it in the session earlier. I'll mention it again. A whole curriculum. Well, what about an e-book? You wouldn't consider that. Wouldn't you consider that online material? What is online material? I think maybe that is something to discuss and develop gradually. I know, yes, an e-book. Look, things are developing. Naturally, there'll be more development. But for each reading lesson and teacher's guide, there is a reading strategy. Absolutely. Okay. Yes, there is development. We are developing, but what we don't want to end up doing is having one single format, the same for everybody, imposed upon everybody. Okay, because then that really takes us back centuries or even more. And it doesn't allow for any differentiation. It doesn't allow us to have inclusive learning context, which is one of the things that we want, right? We want to cater for learners who are confident, for learners who are less confident, and so on and so forth. You're referring to explain. You're referring to very specific activities, okay, and very specific games. Fine, you'll find many games, but you know what? There are a lot of games on the web that you can find, and quite honestly, specifically on grammar activities, okay? And that's not a new thing. It's all games that have been presented online. Yes, like educational sites or just general children's sites, okay? But you will find things if that's what you're looking for. Okay. Teachers should establish supportive educational practices by which they can interact responsibly to learners' interests, build on students' current proficiency levels, and address learning profiles to develop the elements of the curriculum effectively. Yes, absolutely. We agree on all counts. But then you tell me that teachers, a lot of the teachers are just interested on tests. So I'm not sure which way to go. I'm not sure how many of you represent which opinion here. Because on the one hand, I can see that a lot of you are interested in more sort of learner-centered material, in material that the learners can get really engaged in and get their teeth into and do things with. But then, yes, maybe like asking students to search for information on educational site teachers provide. Yes, fine, yes and no. Sometimes you can give them a site, and sometimes you can just let them look for themselves, because this is also a very important skill, and it's very good reading skill as well. When you ask them to look for information, for example, about a particular city, okay, the subjects in your course books are such that you can. A site is much safer, yes, but you're depriving them of the opportunity to start developing their research skills. And actually, here I would like to say, they're teenagers, and unless you tell me otherwise, yes, Google can be used. Unless you tell me otherwise, they search for things on the web. You might have the occasional learner who is not as confident maybe, but most of the learners, unless they have no access to devices, is that common? Not even a mobile, a phone, a smartphone? It's common for students not to have access to devices? Okay, if they haven't got, yes, designing activities that can meet the learners' different styles. Okay, some families don't have devices. Okay, fine. So if that's the case, then obviously you have to help them a bit. Give them the site, and or print out some things for them. Okay, some of the source material, or get them to collaborate. Is there a chance that students could collaborate outside of the classroom? The internet services, not common. Okay, so devices are not a big issue. The internet services. Okay. Yes, they can collaborate. All right. If they can collaborate outside of the classroom, then for example, set up anything that requires a bit of looking and more creative activities. Yes, they can collaborate if they live in the same area. Yes, well, as much as possible. Again, all of these things and what people can do largely depend on learner factors. Okay? This is why I started off by saying, let's find out about the learners, let's focus on the learners. Okay. They can use WhatsApp groups. Absolutely. They can. So that could deal with some of the problems that you're having with certain functions and so on. Yes. And if you can't think of if the teacher can't think of a way to solve this, I'm sure the students will have quite a few suggestions. I think they enjoy projects on WebQuest, yes? So basically, before anything else, many teachers have WhatsApp groups for each class they teach. Very good. Okay, that's great. So basically, teachers already operate as I forgot the word. Can you remind me? The person that facilitates communication as mediators. Okay, which is one of the very sort of trendy things that has been going on for a while. You mediate when you facilitate and improve and make communication a lot more effective among people, be it students or other people. Okay, so when you're really on the lookout as a teacher to find ways to get things through, then obviously you are developing mediation in all kinds of ways. There's a lot of information available about our students that we don't always have access to, because some of the things that the students can do and some of the things they know about can actually answer quite a lot of these questions. It's not allowed to contact students. Okay, I can't really make any comment on that. That's, if it's not allowed, then fine, it's not allowed. But I hope it is allowed to set up work to do in groups, to collaborate outside the classroom. Only Microsoft Teams. Okay, fine. That's better than not having any way to collaborate. Okay, can I ask you to have a quick look at your handout, the first handout, which is enabling learning, making the most of knowledge resources, focusing on the learner. Okay. All right. As I said, this is quite a long handout. It's for you to use as you wish or not use, whatever you think is appropriate. And it covers some key points in managing learning and managing resources. There's a note to you, note to supervisors right at the top. Okay, that you can have a look at maybe later. All right. Now, I did mention at some point setting up activities. I think, again, Telegram groups can be an alternative choice. I don't know about that. Intermediate supervisor handout session. Yeah. Okay. Let me just stress a couple of these points. Setting up activities. Setting up activities is a make or break point in all lessons. Say you're following the book. Okay? Say you're following the book and you want them to read, you want them to do the very first task of reading here. It says, think about a museum performance or sports event that you attended. Try to remember as many sensory details as you can. Write notes in the chart. Okay? Now, a teacher that is really feeling the stress, the time stress, will probably just give the instructions very quickly, possibly translate them, and get on with the activity. Yes? Yes, thank you. No, not a good idea. Reading and understanding instructions is one of the most useful things we can do for our learners. It's a real life skill. It's difficult because instructions are very short, but they're very important from an information point of view. They're packed with information. So what I would begin doing, especially after the first sort of couple of years, or first year or so, but I would like to do it all the way through, quite honestly, is first of all, ask the students to read the instructions silently to themselves. Okay? Then go through the instruction with them. Ask a confident student to explain what they understood from it. Okay? And give an example. If not, help them with anything they need to understand. Give them one or two examples. To make sure everybody understands what to do, and then get on with the activity. Students will benefit from being asked to read the instructions themselves and work out what's required It's a very useful function in the educational as well as social and professional context, yeah? Understanding instructions. Also, qualifying exams will require learners to read and understand instructions, as will guidelines, okay? So how can you do that online? Well, pretty much the way you would do it in class, I think. You're addressing your whole class, you're asking them to read that. You can invite volunteers or nominate one or two people to demonstrate for everybody to try and understand. Teacher speaking time, we've sort of talked about. Again, it's collaborative work that's going to save time. But one more thing that I would like to stress here is it's a good idea not to echo what each student says. In other words, you ask students to make a comment about, for example, the museum or the events that they went to, and they say, okay, well, the sound system was not very good. And you say, so the sound system wasn't very good. Okay. Sometimes we echo when it's new things, new language. But when it's in the course of the lesson, eliciting ideas, discussing things and so on, try not to echo, to repeat what each student say, because if you do, the students will never listen to each other. They won't, because they know you're going to be repeating it. Yes, echo keywords, yes. When it's something new, you're repeating it because you're still kind of modeling it. You're involving your advanced learners. This is why we begin with the learners, because there's always someone who knows there. Get them to say it, and then you repeat it because it's part of modeling a new thing. That's a different matter altogether, okay? Again, checking, understanding, concept checking, okay? If you look through the handout, you've got time management, support and monitoring, feedback, visual support, collaborative learning, working in groups, pairs, roles, correction, learner participation, reflection, thought, cognition, engaging, involving learners. Okay, it's just points that I think are key. If you find anything useful, you can pass it on to your teachers, or use it any way you like. That's for you to use or not to use as you see fit. I think there are some people who are who need to go. So I know this has not been very long. We're trying to do a lot in the course of 1 hour. Now, I promise to incorporate all your queries and comments and so on to the best of our abilities in the material for the second cycle. Thank you so very much for attending.
Yes, I would also like to extend the thanks, as Sanai said. Thanks so much for attending the supervisor intermediate level session. We hope this was useful to you, and thank you so much. We're just going to stay back and cover a few Q&As, but you're free to log off. We know you have classes and errands to get done, so thank you so much for joining us today. We'll just stay back for a few Q&As, and we will just let go now. Okay, should I begin, Danai?
Yes, please. It's just talking. I just want to. I'm sorry. I just want to address a comment or question rather about why why Supergoal includes sort of topics, information about other cultures as well. And how would that help learners learn English? Well, what I would like to say is that it's only fair, isn't it? We can't claim to be dealing with a language that's going to be a global language without providing some information that is a little more global. And also because content is very important for learners as well, especially teenagers. We would like to know that at least it is sort of broadening their outlook a little bit and maybe helping them get more interested, more engaged. So basically that's the reason we're doing it, because content is important. If the topic, the content is not interesting for them, does not sort of motivate them, or give them something new, or a bit of new information, they can always go back. You can always go back and personalize. You can always extend through the Arab, the Saudi culture. That's fine. And there are quite a few things in these books that are very much Saudi oriented, okay, and dealing with Arab culture and all that. It's not true that everything is international and nothing or very little has to do with your culture. That's something that's been taken into consideration throughout. So you will find things. But more than that, I think everything lends itself to being personalized and to being related to the student's own culture.
Thanks, Sanai. Very valid point you've raised there. So thank you for covering that.
There's also a very nice, we encouraged, there's a form from Abdullah King. Thank you for this. A form of online professional learning community for teachers where each team meets once every week and discuss issues they're facing and come up with practical solutions. This could be student-oriented, and teachers could create teams with teams up for the students to work together and collaborate even out of school hours. I just wanted to mention that. So there are quite a few things that actually you're perfectly able to answer yourselves. And on this point, sorry, I just would like to address one more thing. Do you know, we keep on talking about collaborative learning, and actually it's collaborative work and it's collaborative teaching. Collaborative teaching is really very, very constructive and very useful, where you can exchange ideas and answer questions and discuss issues, and nobody feels alone and lonely and lost, ever. Because whatever you do, as supervisors, and I know you all work very hard, but you can't be in 100 places at the same time, can you? At all times. So it would be good. So the same thing applies to teachers as well. Collaborative teaching. Maybe that should be another webinar altogether. Thank you.
Yes, it should. And we only have so much time to have a presentation as well as question answers. So we have a limited time. Yes, apologies about that. But we stay back and take up your questions. So feel free to stay back if you want to stay back now. But if you want to log off, then you are free to do that as well. Okay, so the first one I have here, Danai, is what is the difference between learning styles and multiple intelligence in regard of teaching English?
Some of them overlap, but not all of them. Okay? So when we're talking about, when you're talking about auditory learning and so on through listening, then obviously you overlap with what is called musical intelligence in multiple intelligences. Multiple intelligences is a different sort of theory, different approach. Yeah, it's a little more inclusive than the classic learning styles, which are also very valid, because multiple intelligences make us stop and also realize and accept other abilities and talents that people have, which can be used to their advantage and everybody's advantage. Things like artistic intelligence, for example, or nature intelligence. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Can the presenter give us brief suggestions about organizing and preparing for a lesson at home?
You mean lesson planning?
I suppose yes.
Lesson planning would definitely be a separate webinar. I'd love to do it. But for now, what I would, very quickly, what I would suggest, do you mean what to ask the students to do at home?
I think it's
lesson planning. I'm trying to.
About organized planning for lesson at home, online learning now.
All right, okay. Lesson planning for online teaching, basically. Exactly the way you would plan for class. Think about what would the equivalent would be online. So go through the teacher's book, look at the activities, try to observe the principle of focus, what you want the students to see, what you want the students to focus on should be on their screen. So one of the things that could help is to make a note of what you would show on the screen. So you do it in columns, and you have a column that says screen, and you jot down what you would show on screen there. And what you would use, if you would use Microsoft Teams, anything else. And obviously, if you can't have closed pairs, you will have to adjust things in such a way so you have open pairs in class. That's the best I can do under the circumstances, sorry.
No, I think that covers quite a bit. Can you clarify the difference between open pairs and closed pairs?
Okay, let me go back. Okay, student to student in open pairs is you are in class, yeah? Let's think of it as in class. Maybe you're not in class, maybe it's all online. And these are your students, multiply them, depending on how many you have in class. And you're practicing question asking, answering, or you're practicing a role play, a little role play or conversation, which is relevant, a conversation. So, over to you. And you nominate two students. So you ask Ansa and Serish. So you say Ansa, Serish. And the two have to do it for everyone to hear. So if you're in class, it's done across class, yeah? That's open. That's open pairs. So everybody can hear. This is closed pairs. You set up the role play. You get a couple of people to demonstrate, maybe repeat a couple of things, and then you ask the students to work in pairs all at the same time. They're not shouting if they're in class, enough to hear one another in pairs, as you move around and listen to them, help if they need help, and so on. So you keep on moving around and listening. And then you can ask them to demonstrate. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. That's pretty clear, actually. And then the other one is, do you recommend explaining, presenting the lesson from know to unknown or vice versa? I didn't quite get that. Do you recommend explaining, presenting the question from known to unknown or vice versa?
Okay. I think a person is referring to language input per se, and maybe even grammar. Yes, it's always good to elicit, establish what is already available and what is known, and carry on with the new item that you want to present and practice. However, when we approach a topic, a subject, we have to take different things into consideration. So again, we go from the known, right? We assume that the students know, so we ask them, we try to elicit things from them to activate their knowledge. Okay?
Yep, makes sense. And you've covered this, I know it came in the comments, but just for the wider audience, today a teacher was in an awkward situation asking her students what they did over the weekend, but no one answered, and she had to skip and explain the lesson. As a supervisor, I don't know what to advise her.
Okay, I tried to explain that earlier. You need to approach that in a way that is not going to sound like a testing question. Also, if you address the whole class without time for them to think, who is going to answer and say what? An additional reason for that being that teenagers are quite sensitive about what other people think of them. So who is going to dare say what they did if somebody else is going to think, what they did was silly, wasn't even worth talking about? So what I suggested was you set it up as something for pairs to deal with, to find out from each other. Put 2 or 3 questions on the board. Ask them to use those, interview their partners, or even if you're in class, get them to mingle, to move around, interview people, or interview their partners, and then report the different activities. And you make a note of them, you write them on the whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then you carry on with the topic.
Okay. What's the proper strategy for reading passage lesson in online classes?
Same as it is face-to-face.
Okay, yeah. And we'll take a last question here owing to time. It is, do you think McGraw Hill to design textbooks include activities and tasks, especially built to deliver online distance learning? I'm not talking about the support material only, I mean the whole curriculum.
I think I answered that earlier.
Yes. Yes. But if you could just cover that again, because I think that is probably a wider question as well.
Okay. Well, I don't know what sort of plans there might be for other things, but what I said is that as things develop, obviously there's going to be more. We're also, the concern is that online and the sort of digital material does not become so formatted and restrictive so that it's one size fits all, because then we would be totally disregarding needs, all kinds of factors that we all sort of agree to pay some attention to. There are components that you can use online as it is, with learning centers, with the interactive whiteboard, with ActiveBook, whatever you've got available. More, yes. e-books can become totally interactive, all sorts of things. There is material for other age groups as well that's being produced that is very easy to use on all kinds of devices. So it's a huge area and it's developing quite fast. But it's got to be done in a way that is not going to totally overlook needs.
Yeah. Okay, one last pressing question because it's coming too much. How can I use communicative approach in teaching? Please give examples from real life situations.
They're all over the book. Examples from the real life situations. All of the conversations that you have, all of the exchanges that are used in the book are based on the sort of exchanges that take place in real life among people. I don't know how else to answer that question now. If you want to, I can't present the communicative approach, but basically a lot of what happened through the communicative approach quite a few years ago is what we use now. This is for communication. Communication is really the ultimate aim, whether we're talking about spoken communication or written communication. So this is what we're trying to prepare learners for. This is why we want them to acquire the language and not simply do well on tests and things. So it's all geared in that direction.
All right, I guess we've come to the end of the questions. Thank you for your questions. We hope we've answered all of them or most of them at least. If your question has not been answered, then we have it on the record at least and we'll be able to get back to you somehow. But thank you so much for sending your questions. This was a really engaging session, so thank you for your participation throughout. And tomorrow we will cover the teacher training sessions. So it's going to be intermediate level again. There are 5 sessions to this, so if you want, you can get your teachers to register for these and they will receive the links automatically. But I guess for now it's done from my end tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your participation. And yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to all the moderators for helping with the Q&As as well. Yep, I guess that's it. Your certificate of participation you will receive after the webinar series is over. So this should be around after November 19th. So watch out for that email and you can download it. Thank you for joining us and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much.